I'm very excited to finally be talking about some Tyranitar cards. Neo On was definitely Tyranitar's time to shine for this era of the TCG. Base Neo, not so much because of energy removal. Rocket On didn't really have enough support. But now the time has come, let's talk Neo Discovery Tyranitar. The main draw of this card, of course, being Trample. So it is understandable why Tyranitar would not have worked in base Neo. Getting 4 energy onto a Pokemon was just impossible for that format, but in Neo 1, pretty doable, especially when the Pokemon in question has 100 HP and no weakness. And if you break down Trample into just a cost-benefit analysis, it's definitely worth it, I would say, for the 4 energy, because if both of them are Special Dark, you're dealing 70 damage instead of 50, and you're also going to have a high chance of getting multiple knockouts from a single attack if you hit those coin flips right on your opponent's bench Pokemon. Typically with this Tyranitar deck, the first Trample you're going to be using is on turn 5, and by that point in time, your opponent definitely has at least a couple of babies on the bench. So if you're a coin flip master, that's potentially 3 knockouts on your first turn that you use Trample. Because, yes, this deck does include Double Gust, and so you're going to be able to strategically place an active Pokemon to take that 70 damage. Turn 5 may seem very slow. It may give you flashbacks to people trying to make base set Charizard work, but in Neo On, there's a lot you can do in 5 turns of setup. Mainly thinking about Elekid or Pichu, but Tyranitar also has an attack for 3 energy, so you've got that option, as well as attacking with Puputar. There are several routes you can take depending on the matchup, so let's go ahead and get into the deck list and start talking strategy. So we'll be using the Larvitar that is from Neo Destiny. There's another Larvitar in Neo Discovery, but I absolutely hate its artwork so much that I refuse to use it, but that one also has 40 HP, and I do think that the Neo Destiny Larvitar actually has better attacks, so it all works out. There's a Larvitar and a Pupitar in Expedition as well that both have low cost attacks, so those are an option as well. I can talk more about that at the end of the video. The Pupitar I'm using is from Neo Discovery. I think it's a pretty great stepping stone into Tyranitar because it does have Skull Bash, that way you can deal some decent damage while you're waiting to evolve up into Tyranitar and utilize its 3 energy attack. Dust Devil is also a really great play, but for this build, I'm not running any fighting energy at all. I decided to go all special energy for this build and focus on more of a healing strategy. But if you do want to go a little more aggro, you can just replace a couple playsets of the special energy cards in this deck with straight up fighting energy. And Dust Devil is a great attack to use in setting up a future Trample for multiple knockouts. So running a 4-4-3 line of Tyranitar. I'm also running 2 copies of Unown D. You may have noticed with Trample, it also targets your own Pokemon. But if you've got Unown D on your bench, Trample is not going to be dealing any damage to your Pokemon. Unown D will prevent all of it. Unless, of course, you're playing against a Muck. Now, one of the safeguards against Muck is Pichu. You're going to be using Pichu early game to deal some decent spread damage. The biggest threat to this Tyranitar build is decks that get set up very quickly using the speed of Pokemon powers. I'm thinking about Entei Cargo or Meganium. Hopefully a banded Pichu will be enough of a threat where they may hold off on playing those Pokemon that have those powers. And you also may be thinking, well, if Pichu attacks and you have an Unown on your bench, that's gonna nearly knock it out. Well, you're not gonna need Unown until turn 5 when you start attacking with Tyranitar. By that point, you're not going to need Pichu anymore. That's going to be safely on your bench, hopefully. The ideal start for this deck is to have a Pichu in the active position. There's only 2 copies of it in the deck, so it is more likely you're going to be starting with a Larvitar, but that's not such a bad thing, as your opponent's probably going to be starting with a Cleffa anyway, which will give you time to move things around, or just go ahead and jump straight into your setup if you know that you're not going to be needing Pichu. If you're playing a Steelix deck or a Kingdra deck, you still got your draw power, your refreshing power, running 3 copies of Elm, full playset of Copycat. Since this deck isn't using Cleffa itself, Copycat's the next best thing. You can just copy your opponent's Eeks using 3 Pokemon Trader. just in case you do get stuck with those unknowns in your hand a lot earlier than you need them. You can swap them out for Puppetars, or if you don't have a Pichu yet and you're going to be needing it against your opponent's Pokemon powers. Double Gust to use defensively early game and protect your Larvitars and Puppetars, potentially even your own Tyranitars from being knocked out before you can get a Trample completely set up. But later game, once you are trampling, that's going to be your way to pull out easy knockouts. Hit your opponent's Pokemon that don't have focus bands on them, that aren't babies. Hit their key cards really hard and hope that the side effect of Trample, that 30 damage done to their bench Pokemon, is going to score you some additional knockouts. Once you do have a Tyranitar set up, it is going to be your mission to keep it alive as long as possible. That way those 4 energy go a lot longer. You can get as many tramples off as possible. Gold Berry is going to be one of the methods you can do that. Balloon Berry is another one, that way it can retreat when needed, because when one Tyranitar gets knocked out, you want to have another one on hand pretty quick. You can't take another 3 or 4 turns to set up another Tyranitar. So once you start trampling, you do it for as long as you possibly can. 3 copies of Focus Band for your Unknowns and your Pichus. A Pichu with a focus band on it's going to be great early game. It's going to help stall long enough for you to get some energy down on your Larvitars, Puppetars, Tyranitars, and you don't want your Unknowns to be huge gust targets, so if you play an Unknown, you better make sure you get a focus band on it. Full playset of Power Charge and a couple copies of Town Volunteers to help with the resetup of a Tyranitar. If one gets knocked out, that's going to help you get those resources back quickly. Start trampling again as soon as possible. Couple copies of Rainbow Energy, just because 4 Darkness Energy isn't really going to be enough. You can't depend on those enough, and you're going to have to use Power Charge to get them back out of the discard, and so if you're depending solely on that, it's not great for the consistency of the deck. So a couple copies of Rainbow Energy in here to help with that, alongside the full playset of Special Dark. And I said earlier I'm not running any fighting energy in this deck. The reason for that is because I wanted to run a full playset of Potion Energy. Just another tool that you can utilize in order to make you're getting the most out of every Tyranitar you set up. So if it's taking some chip damage while you're evolving up, Potion Energy can help heal some of that off while you're also setting up one of those colorless energy for Trample. And with Recycle Energy, they recycle themselves, so you don't have to. I mentioned earlier in the video that there are some Expedition Larvitar and Puppetard that go great in this deck. They're arguably better because they can attack for lower energy costs. That Larvitar's got more HP. But I don't actually own any copies of these cards because e-reader cards are expensive. But if you are running the version of this deck that uses fighting energy, I would say definitely play test it with these 2 as well and figure out which ones you like better for your particular playstyle. Speaking of which, the version of this deck that uses basic fighting energy is actually probably better and more versatile. But I did want to go with the build I had the most enjoyment and success with in playtesting, which was the one that kept Tyranitar alive longer by loading it up on Gold Berries and Potion Energy. That way it stood a better chance against decks that didn't rely on Pokemon powers like Kingdra, Steelix, and Donphan. And having basic energy cards in your deck is much more preferable if you think that you're going to be playing against Light Dragonite or Light Golduck. Light Dragonite is gonna shut down Tyranitar's Special Darks anyway, but you can threaten it with Pichus attacking turn after turn if Light Dragonite's not able to knock it out. But Light Golduck is much harder to deal with. Light Golduck became a pretty popular rogue because it would just absolutely massacre decks that were fully loaded with special energy, like the deck that I just went over. And so if you're up against Light Golduck, you want to be using more basic energy cards, much less reliance on the special energy cards, because yeah, people really underestimate Light Golduck, but when you consider the types of decks that were being ran in this format and how loaded they were with special energy cards like Steelix, Light Golduck has really great matchups with Steelix, and of course, this Tyranitar deck. If you want to go fully basic, well, you don't need to be a fancy bitch when you got a Porygon 2 on your bench, because it can convert one of those basic energy into any other type of energy card you want, including Dark. Now you're not going to get the attack bonus you would from a special dark, but if you've got a couple Porygon on your bench, you can convert 2 basic energy cards into dark, and you are good to go. You can trample away without having to worry about including a playset of Power Charge to get the special darks back, but in exchange you do have to worry about Porygon 2 being Gust Bait, and with 70 HP, do you put a Focus Band on it or a Gold Berry? It really depends. So what do you guys think about this T-Tar build? Do you lean more towards the side of special energy, or do you lean more towards the side of using the basic fighting energy? Or do you just have your own way of running Tyranitar? Make sure to let me know. Find me on social media at any and all of the links down in the description. And until next video, bye.